morning, good afternoon. How are you keeping? Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Grace Nzula. I'm an HR consultant with Atara Solutions. Atara Solutions is a HR consulting and training firm. We offer HR consultancy services that includes job evaluations, salary surveys, policy reviews and updates, organization restructuring, documentation for your organization, among other services. We also offer talent acquisition, which is what is known as recruitment. If you're looking for staff members, you can get in touch with us. We are able to give you those services. We also offer what we call HR manager outsourced for an organization that does not want a full-time HR or wants to outsource their HR department. We offer those services as well. And we also offer learning and development. Under learning and development, we have a mentorship program dubbed Growth Grid Mentorship Program. We have coaching services. We have team building services. We have training services. If you're looking to capacity build your organizations, if you're looking for conference speakers, moderators, all that we offer, and the learning and development. And that's where this program sits. You are joining us. This program is called Get It Right with Atara Solutions. And Get It Right with Atara Solutions is a webinar series that seeks to demystify issues in employment and entrepreneurship. We do this every Tuesday at 8 o'clock. And we have done this this is the 6th year. We were celebrating our 6th anniversary last week on Tuesday. We started this in 2020 on 23rd of June. And if you want to catch up and if you want to upgrade yourself, please go to our YouTube channel, Get It Right with Atara Solutions. And there's a lot of learning materials there that can help you upgrade your career or help you in executing your jobs. And of course, we have my co-host, Mr. Richard. You can go ahead and introduce yourself.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you, have you ever seen Irene Kemasha introduce government guests? I always salivate. And he's here to tell us a few things about it. And communication is very important for you and me as we become better at our game. My name is Richard J. Magoma, HR professional who specializes in public speaking and interview preparation. I can't waste any other second other than waiting for Irene Kemasha to give us certain things that will help us become better at what we are doing. Because we are told that communication is the fluid that promotes organizational excellence. Over to you, Grace.
Thank you, Richard. Please do not get stuck with your interview, wondering what is the challenge. Please get in touch with Richard for your interview coaching. And thank you very much. I see Rebecca saying congratulations on your 6th anniversary. Thank you very much. It's amazing how time flies. I mean, we are here every Tuesday, January to November. And it's just been amazing. And I see Renee Mushiri saying consistency is good job, Team Atara. Thank you very much. And we pray that we keep going and see where this takes us. So at this point in time, allow me to bring on board Madam Irene Kemasha. Irene Kemasha is the head of communications and partnerships at IHRM. She also is my friend, and she has taught me quite a number of things. When Richard said that, gosh, I have a cold. When Richard said that, I have been a student of Irene when it comes to matters protocol. And if you know how it works from private sector to public sector, things are very different. There's somebody who speaks after somebody or before somebody. There's order. You can't just stand and start speaking. There's a way things are supposed to flow. And I am happy to say that I have been a student of Irene. Irene is a journalist, but also a HR professional, and she's here to tell us how we can really leverage on communication to be able to make a difference in our institutions and in our organization. So without further ado, allow me to invite Irene. Take it away.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Grace, for the warm welcome and for the opportunity to be here. Get It Right with Atara Solutions. I've been on these conversations for a while. I'm the one on this end this time round. And thank you so much. And indeed, thank you for being a candle that lights other candles. You are always happy to open doors and to support other people. And so I appreciate. And for Richard, thank you for the warm welcome and for the kind remarks. Indeed, it has been a learning journey for all of us. Recently, we were at a function where we had the president and we had that ambition. I don't know whether Madam Kuresha, my boss, is in the call, to host the president. And we were thinking twice based on the dynamics that we saw. Yes, Madam Kuresha is here. Thank you so much, Madam, for the support and for being on the call. And we were thinking twice, do we really want to host the president because of the dynamics that are involved? Thank you so much. I hope that for the next few minutes, we are able to share some thoughts around HR as a communicator-in-chief. Grace, please confirm that you can see my slides.
Yes,
right.
They are showing, but you need to put them on full screen. Yeah, there we go.
I have.
Excellent.
Okay.
Good.
So HR as a communicator-in-chief, one may wonder what's the relationship between communication and HR. That is something that we want to look at, the nexus. We also want to define what is effective communication, because sending a message or an email or speaking to someone does not necessarily mean that you have communicated. So what does it mean to communicate to somebody? We'll also look at how do you communicate effectively, upwards, downwards, horizontally, diagonally, all those ways, so that you can have everybody moving towards the strategic objective of the organization. We'll also look at internal communication, look at executive communication, or what I would call leadership communication, and finally, crisis communication, and how all this ties together towards building an organization's trust, towards enhancing productivity, as well as the goal of the organization. As mentioned, I am currently working with the Institute of Human Resource Management, leading the communication department, and I'm sure most of us are members of IHRM. If you're not, please, you need to become a member of IHRM. And tomorrow is HR Month. So I wish all HR professionals a happy HR Month. Please be on the lookout for the very many activities that we will have lined up for you in the HR Month. So let's get into it. Question, I think I should just go back. And you tell me on the chats very quickly, have you ever sent somebody an SMS, an email, and they did not respond? Yes or no, do you think they communicated? Very quickly, Grace can assist me with the responses because I cannot see the chat. Very quickly, you sent somebody an email or an SMS and they did not respond. Do you think they communicated?
Jackie says, why?
Nelson says no.
Yeah.
Mary says yes, yes. Edward Ominde, no from Christopher, yes from Washuka. All right. I think a majority say yes, that they communicated, and that is true. And we're going to see how that is communication. When you send somebody something and they are quiet, what are they saying? And how do you decipher some of those things? So communication, if you're going to define it, let me move on to my slide. Okay, so communication as we define it is the purposeful exchange of information. Purposeful exchange of information. If you're speaking to somebody and they're not interested in what you're saying, you're not communicating. So what is it that you want to say? The intention of what you want to say. Number two, it is judged on not what you are saying as a communicator, the sender of the message, but how it is understood by the recipient and the action that is taken. So as HR professionals, you often communicate policy issues, you communicate changes in the organization. One thing to send an email to broadcast that is not a guarantee that the employees you're working with have understood what you have said and also have taken action based on what you intended. So communication is purposeful, number one, and it has to be understood by the other person, and also action must be taken. And there are different forms of communication. I think this is known to most of us. It can be verbal, it can be written, it can be non-verbal, and this will bring us to the question that I asked earlier. And there are different channels through which we communicate. It could be online, on SMS, on call, on written material, on owned media, which is like broadcast media, you pay for it, or media that you buy. And the success is measured on what is said. It's not measured on what is said, but on what is received, understood, and acted upon. I think I've said that. So one cannot not communicate. I think this brings us to the question that I've asked. Whether somebody responds to your email or responds to your SMS or to that missed call, you say hi and they don't say hi back, that is communication. Even no is a communication. Silence is a communication. But in a corporate setting, in an organization, silence, delays, inconsistencies are destructive. And that is why we are saying, as a HR leader, that you want to be intentional, purposeful with your communication so that you don't leave room for delays, you don't have room for silence, you don't have room for inconsistencies and miscommunication as an effect of that silence. So HR leaders must be intentional with what you want to communicate. Something else about communication, we say in the communication space, is that communication is perception. What does that mean? That true meaning of any message lies not in the speaker, but in the recipient and how they interpret that meaning. And this interpretation, if you look at the communication cycle, we have the message, we have the sender, we have the message, we have the channel that they have chosen to use, then we have noise in the middle, what we call filters, then we have the recipient and feedback, so that you complete the cycle of communication. So everybody, everyone, myself included, we all have our filters, what we call noise. And we filter information based on our culture, we filter information based on past experience, we filter information based on bias. So as you communicate as a leader, you need to factor in all this noise, because you can say one thing to 3 people, and 2 will understand, each 3 of them will understand something completely different. So how can you ensure that this message is received the same way across board? We are going to get into that. So as a HR professional, HR leader, if you want to be a communicator-in-chief, there are 3 dimensions that you want to look at. Dimension number 1 is the information dimension. You want to ensure that the information you want to share is accurate. Number 2, that the information is timely. You know, we don't have a board meeting, and that is when everybody is engaged in doing something, and you want to release a new policy. In the middle of getting ready for a board meeting, people have board papers, or you know, it's the end of the year, like now for government institutions, you need to close books, you need to submit reports, and this is when now you want to have a very serious meeting on a critical matter in the organization. So timing is also is important. Number 3 is how relevant is that information? Whether it's a policy issue, whether it's a change issue, you need to factor that in. Secondly is the relational dimension. And this applies especially to executive leadership, bottom-up kind of leadership. How do you sustain psychological safety within the organization so that employees are confident or are feeling it is safe for me to share feedback, it is safe for me to raise an issue if I'm having any challenge? And the third dimension is the strategic dimension, which is what I would want us to focus on our call this evening. How are you as a HR leader translating what the leadership is saying, the leadership direction, into human understanding? Remember, we are coming from the backdrop that our understanding is different based on our perception. So when you say something, how we interpret it, how we understand, and the action we take is pegged on how we understood it. So how do you pick the vision, the mission, the core values, the culture of the organization, policy changes, strategic direction that you want to take as an organization, and then interpret that or translate that from what the leaders are saying to what employees will understand. You're acting as a bridge. And then the reverse is also true. How do you take the human reality, what the employees are saying, the feedback they are giving, and then translating that into leadership intelligence? I sit in very many HR meetings and rooms, and we get a lot of questions around how does HR sit at the table? What are we doing to support HR sit at the table? And the challenge has always been pushed back to the professionals. What value are you adding to the organization? Because if you're adding value, then you will automatically find place on the table. So this is one way. If you're able to decipher the realities of employees, the feedback they're sharing, even the quiet, the silence, and then use that as leadership intelligence and share that back with your leadership, then you're adding value. So why is communication important to HR? One is to build trust. You know, trust is built on the ability, the benevolence, and the integrity of the organization. And each is demonstrated through how HR communicates. Sometimes I don't envy HR professionals because you are caught in the middle. Employees say you side with employers. Employers feel like you're always advocating for employees. So it's a tricky balance. But how you communicate that, what the employer is pushing for, what employees are pushing for, is the basis of trust. Secondly, communication is important, and this is effective communication is important for engagement. I'm currently doing a study about leadership communication and employee engagement, and the findings are towards executive briefs, visibility of the leaders, and the quality of engagement and receiving feedback is critical for employee engagement. And Gallup says the same, that employees with managers who communicate clearly and regularly have significant more engagement. So how are you supporting senior leadership to be a lot more visible to the employees? How are you as a HR leader also being visible to the employees so that you can enhance engagement? And thirdly is productivity. Productivity is the buzzword at the moment in the world of work, because we are seeing how do we move away from just performance, ticking boxes, calculating activities, to actually value and impact in terms of productivity. So how engaged and trusting employees give effort and they go beyond the job description. So as HR professionals, we are the drivers of productivity and communicating so that employees understand where are we coming from. What is our strategic plan saying? How do I contribute towards achieving the goals of the organization? Once we have clarity around those issues, then we are going to achieve productivity. So HR owns the employee experience, and information is a critical part of that employee experience. What people hear, how they interpret it, and whether they believe it. This is a trust issue here, whether they believe it. Have you been consistent? Have you said this before and failed to live up to the expectations or the promises? How the leaders say it, the tone of voice, the body language, are they believable? Are they trustworthy? So if employees are going to believe it, then that is going to impact the achieving of the organizational goal. And then communication operationalizes policies. It is one thing to have good documents, and this probably is a challenge we're having as a nation, where we have wonderful documents, but then it becomes challenging to operationalize it. Do we understand the document? Do we understand how we want to achieve it? Do the people understand what we want to achieve? So a redundancy policy, for example, can be legally acceptable, but if it is not handled properly in terms of communication, and there is room for rumors or there's confusion, for example, it can be catastrophic for the organization. So I am just building a case that there's a nexus indeed between communication and HR leadership. And if you're going to achieve the goals of the organization, if you're going to have impact as a HR leader, then you need to be a communicator-in-chief. You need to support the teams to come with you. So I indicated this earlier, that HR now acts as a bridge between the boardroom and the workforce. HR leadership and communication are inseparable. And so leadership is an act of influencing, and influence is achieved through communication. You cannot punish people into influence or push them into influence. You really have to, it's a charismatic kind of thing. You have to woo them, you have to talk to them, you have to carry them with you so that they can achieve the goals of the organization. So authority without communication is merely positional power. You may be in charge, but if you're not bringing on board everybody, then you're not communicating. And if you're not communicating, then it creates a vacuum for rumors, for anxiety, for disengagement. So the HR is at the middle, if you can see the icon there. We have the executive leadership on one end, we have the workforce on the other end, and we have HR at the heart of it. So you have to be able to speak to strategy when you go to the boardroom and share what I call leadership intelligence. And you have to come back and translate what the boardroom is saying to the people so that they can understand what is being said. And the world of work has changed totally. The hybrid work has removed the informal corridors and the channels that employees used to use in the past. So employees now expect a lot more transparency because they're not even seeing you on a daily basis. They expect that when they share feedback, that their voice is heard and that the boardroom also receives that feedback. And so as we continue to navigate the world of work and the workforce, communication then becomes very critical. So how do you move communication in an organization? There's a downward communication. This is leadership sharing their intent, which is translated into employee-relevant language and action by the HR professionals. And this comes from the boardroom, the strategic direction. After that, like I was indicating the communication channels, it has to have the feedback element. So the upward communication now comes, not just the top communicating downwards. So upward communication is the workforce reality, and the risks that have surfaced are being shared now with the leadership. Then we have lateral communication. We have said now the structures have moved away from being hierarchical. We now have flat structures. So the lateral communication comes in handy. How are we coordinating teams? How are we sharing information? Do we have one team working on the same thing and the other team working on something different? And this is where HR comes in, especially with internal communication. How do departments share information? How do people come together and know this is what team A is working on, team B is working on, and this is how I come on board, this is my contribution. And thirdly, there's crisis communication. This is when we have rapid, you have to have a rapid response. It needs honesty and human communication because when a crisis comes, you may not have time to plan. And we will look at those details a little more deeply. So for internal communication, for instance, trust rests on 3 areas. One, the ability to communicate, the benevolence or how much information you're sharing, and the integrity of the leaders. If the leader is not trusted, it doesn't matter how much you communicate because the people will not believe you. And each is built through communication. You have to be competent, you have to have the right information. So HR leaders, you have to understand the business. If you're going to communicate about nuclear science, actually in one of the meetings, someone was joking, they moved from, I think, the Ministry of ICT and they were taken to the Ministry of Energy. And they had to learn a whole new language about the energy sector. So that's it. If you don't have the understanding of the business, then it becomes difficult to communicate what boardroom is saying because we will not understand it in the first place. And then also interpret that to the team members. So effective internal communication flows up, down, sideways, and not just downwards. And psychological safety is critical. If the employees do not feel that they are safe to share their feedback or to give an opinion or to fail or to be corrected or to ask for help, then you will not be communicating. You will ask for something, they'll be quiet, and only surface when, again, you need it. And then some practical tools, you can have multi-channel communication platforms, whether it is the intranet, whether it's WhatsApp, whether it's videos, whether it's briefs. You can have informal setups where people can come together and share their opinions, ask HR anything or ask the CEO anything, a day like that or a session like that, and then continue building this over time. We have organizations who have demonstrated, successful internal communication. You can share with us on chat, maybe what you're doing within your organization in terms of internal communication, what has worked, and what you can share with the rest of the colleagues. Before we get into downward communication, before we get into upward communication, downward communication is translating the strategy into meaning. So this is leadership, articulating the vision, the values, and the strategy. And how can you do that? Translate the strategy into employee relevant material, simplify it, moving away from the jargon so they can understand. Secondly, it is to coach the executive. And you see, for you to be coaching the executive, you also need to be competent in that area. So you probably also need to up your communication game so that you're able to coach the executive. So they're able to speak authentically, they're able to tell their stories, they're able to share and to woo the people to come with them, to influence them. Thirdly is to prepare the leaders for difficult conversations. I think this is squarely sitting in the HR space and with line managers especially, building their capacity to handle difficult conversations. And then fourthly is use visible leadership rituals. Like I said, executive briefings, in video updates, you have people who are across the region or across the country, open hours, on this day and this day, you can access the CEO. I think those things are not new to HR professionals, but they work even as far as communication is concerned. And finally, ensure that messages match lived realities. The gap between the message and the behavior is where trust collapses. It's one thing to say, is the saying of you're preaching water and drinking wine. If you apply that in the communication space, then trust is going to be lost. Then we get into upward communication. This is speaking to the executive or receiving feedback. So the workforce intelligence and the risks that are surfaced, you have to table this at the executive table. And this requires cadre. It requires confidence. It requires speaking truth to power, telling the authorities and the leaders where they are not doing the right thing, where they're not being fair with employees. And if you've observed the trends with issues around sustainability reporting, the issue of transparency is becoming critical. So whether it's the leadership transparency, whether it's the organizational transparency, stakeholders are very key to see, are you trustworthy people? And so speaking upwards requires courage, requires confidence, and the ability to share with the leadership what the employees are saying. So how do you translate complex human dynamics? And how do you present that? For example, instead of just saying, we have 3 people who are on acting appointments on their contract, then how you package that language, the framing, we call it framing. You can say unresolved acting appointments are legal exposure. That is going to capture the CEO's attention when they hear they're exposed legally, as opposed to saying, we have 3 people whose contracts who are in an acting position and you leave it at that. So how you position workforce concerns is what I called leadership intelligence, how you communicate. The other one is building psychological safety. I think we've talked about that. Resist sanitizing uncomfortable truths, complaints, policy issues. Don't protect leadership from discomfort. And finally, deliver hard truths with tact, evidence, and solution orientation. Now, this is playing politics, I think, when you have to respond hard truths with tact, is how you package it. When do you say it? Do you time when the leader or the CEO has just come from a very difficult situation, and that is when you want to overwhelm them with more, the employees are not happy, or employees have this. Timing is important, how you frame it. Where does power sit? Does power sit in the room, or do you need to go through somebody else who can then go and get to the CEO? The tact is important. You must have evidence to support your arguments. So data is critical, so that it's not just feelings. People are feeling this way, people are feeling this way. You can support it with data, with performance, with how the organization is achieving in terms of bottom line. And finally, solution orientation. With the executive, if you do not have a solution, then don't even raise the problem. Don't flag it out if you cannot offer a solution. So HR must translate all these complex people data into business relevant narratives for the leadership, framing a satisfaction survey, for instance, as an organizational risk. We have talked about unresolved acting appointment as a legal exposure. HR also shapes the executive voice. When you're writing, and I think Richard talked about this, in the IHRM space, we do a lot of activities which post senior government officials, and speech writing is part of it. So do you understand what your CEO wants to say? Do you understand what your chairman wants to say? Do you understand what message needs to go to the employee? Do you understand what employees want to say? Because if you have an opportunity to craft a speech, then you can put those things in that speech. And the CEO will feel that I've communicated. The chairman of the board will feel that, we have communicated the policy or the strategic position. Employees will hear that the issues we raised in our previous meeting have been addressed by the CEO in this speech. So it may sound like just the comms people or the PR people, but what is your contribution? I'm yet to have a scenario where I've sat with or I've had, other department leaders say, we're having this activity, why don't you add this in the speech of the CS, or this is my perspective. Maybe the legal people sometimes will look at it and share, but before it goes to the CEO, I am challenging us as HR leaders. Have you gone to that comms person and said, these are the issues the employees are raising, these are the issues I had the CEO talk about, how can we capture them in this message so that everybody feels heard and we communicate? Then there's lateral communication, aligning across the organization. So two-way dialogue and coordination across departments, among peers, and in the institutional ecosystem. Sometimes you find one department is working on something and the other team members are not aware. So how do you design communication that flows sideways within the organization, not only up and down, cross-function? How do you have briefings and joint forums? How do you build? And for us at IHRM, working on projects as teams, where you have reps from different departments come together on a project, that has worked for us, because then you may have project A, project B, and so you're represented in this project. There's another one representing you in another project. So at any one given time, everybody knows what is happening. Then coordinate consistently with the communication and PR and legal teams. I think I've talked about this, so that you give your input and you make sure that the messages that are being crafted and going internally to the executive, to the stakeholders outside the organization, capture really what is critical to build trust and to ensure that there is efficient communication. Then run multi-channel forums. I think with technology now, we have all sorts of platforms where you can communicate. Use employee voice platforms where you're taking pulse surveys, other than the annual surveys, so you're getting feedback. The private sector is very good with this, especially with stakeholder engagement. You access a service, and before you leave even the building, you've already gotten an alert asking you how was your service. Just 1 or 2 questions and it's done. I don't know whether suggestion boxes still work, but they are there. And free forums where people can openly speak. And then apply the 3C model. 1, clarity. Ensure that before you leave a meeting or after you share a message, follow up to find out, what did people understand? Are we saying the same thing? Secondly, consistency. Don't send a message today or collect feedback today, then forget it until, a number of years later or a number of months later. Have a schedule. How often do we do this? And then choose the appropriate channel. If it's for employees, if it's an informal platform that makes them a lot more comfortable, use that. For external stakeholders, you can use the formal email and all that. So let's speak about crisis communication. And crisis communication is how you prepare, for that day when you don't have the freedom to write speeches and go back and check and all that. And an example of a good crisis communication plan that has been studied in Kenya in the recent past is how the Ministry of Health handled the COVID-19 pandemic, the communication aspect of it. I'll not get into the other details. And so one, there was centralized communication. We had a center and all communication came there, then it was disseminated through other platforms. Secondly, there was a routine briefing. Every other time we were glued to our screens or receiving alerts on our phones about what was happening. So the routine briefings, and then they used multi-channel delivery. You would have live coverage on television, you'd have write-ups that are being distributed. There was a lot of community engagement where people knew, especially radio is very good with community engagement. Everybody knew what was happening at any one given time. And finally, there was a continuous feedback loop. When people, there was an issue, then it was shared and people got a way forward. So in crisis communication, you need a crisis communication plan, which should be annexed to your communication policy. So that you are clear in terms of a crisis. And maybe the most recent one is MP-SHA, and I think they handled that well as well. When there was communication that they have been stopped from, I think, receiving SHA payments or something of the sort. And almost immediately, they had a communication that went out. And one, they owned up that, yes, this is true. This has happened, but we are working on it. There is no need for alarm, and, and subsequent communication also followed. So do you have a plan in your organization in case of a crisis? Who is meant to speak? What are they meant to say? In most cases, you'll find people denying that there is a crisis or taking too long to respond, and that gives room for rumors. So you want to have a plan, be clear who is the spokesperson, even have templates in terms of, if we have this scenario, then this is what we do. And when it comes to crisis communication, the most important thing, one, is honesty. That you own up. We are having this challenge and we are handling it. Share what is known and also indicate what is not yet known. If there's something that we're still working on, you indicate we will share it as soon as we have it. The second thing is accountability. We have had scenarios where the institution throws an employee or the CEO or somebody, the board member, under the bus. There is need to have, ownership as an institution, so that there's accountability, people have confidence in what you're saying, other than the infighting and trying to set somebody up. Thirdly is listening. Create channels where you're receiving feedback. And often when you have a crisis, you tend to focus on external stakeholders, and you forget the internal stakeholders who are the employees. So this is where HR comes in. PR and comms may focus on external stakeholders, but for HR, you need then to focus on the employees. Are they even aware that there's a crisis in the organization? Are they aware what is supposed to happen? If other stakeholders get in touch with them and they need help, do employees know what to say? Or they will also be in shock and say, oh, that is happening. Oh, we are not aware. And the organization loses credibility because then you look bad, you look disorganized. And then orientation, especially for the employees, keep them focused on what is important and resolving the issue as soon as possible. So silence in the early hours of a crisis is a no-no, because it feels like you have abandoned people, especially employees, and also your stakeholders. They need to know what is happening. And then a workforce that receives no information will generate their own. And often that is worse than the reality. So communicate on the socials, and don't wait for WhatsApp, communication corridor or the unions. Just, give them information to avoid speculation and rumors. So communication as a architect of trust, internal, executive and crisis communication, which we have looked at, are not to operate in distinction. They are to work together. So what you share with your employees, how the leadership communicates to employees and receives the feedback and sets the pace even with external stakeholders, and also how you prepare for a crisis. They all should work in tandem. So you cannot build trust during a crisis. So you have to prepare for it and use what you have prepared in the past. So internal communication builds the foundation so that everybody internally knows that this is what we are meant to do. This is how we communicate. This is how we share feedback. This is how we ask for clarity if something is not clear. And then the executive communication or the leadership communication aligns and amplifies, paints the bigger picture for the organization and externally communicates the same with stakeholders. And finally, crisis communication tests that system. When there's a crisis is when you even forget how things are done. You forget what works, you forget what you had planned. So a crisis will test how strong your system is. So how do you become a communicator in chief? Because that's the goal, so that you are supporting your leadership, you're also supporting your employees and the organization as a whole to engage, to be on the same page. One, treat communication as a core HR strategy and not an administrative add-on or something that is done by a different department. Build it into the HR competency framework so that you're able to disseminate this information and the goal and even the culture, how you interpret the culture of the organization is all about communication. Then conduct regular communication audits. Are we clear on what you're communicating? How consistent are we? Are we using the right channel? And then be visible. There is a joke of management by walking around, but it still applies. There are days you need to just walk around and see what's going on. You have to have forums where you listen and receive feedback. You have to have touch points where your workforce are engaging and are comfortable to say what is happening. Then earn a seat at the executive. If you're going to, especially to handle crisis communication, then the leadership has to trust the intelligence that you bring, the information that you bring, and you craft that messaging as useful information for the leadership and not just reporting on HR issues. What impact does this have on the business? And be the custodian of the organizational trust, so that you're not just passing messages, or we had a meeting, the leadership has decided that you're going to let go of XYZ number of people. Instead, be one that crafts that message. Even tell the leadership, no, we cannot send it this way. We cannot say it this way. This is not the right time to send this communication. And some of the skill sets that you need to be a communicator-in-chief, one, bilingual fluency. Can you speak the language of employees? And can you speak the language of the board? That is a challenge to us now in the HR space. How do you build the muscle to speak the business language? And how do you also put yourself in the position of the employees and also understand where they're coming from? The narrative and storytelling, the ability to persuade people to come with you, to see the bigger picture, to see their contribution towards what you want to achieve, the vision of the organization, even in public sector, towards the larger picture of the country. Private sector, what the stakeholders want, what the shareholders want. That ability to tell stories, to persuade people, to speak in front of people, that is a skill you need to build. Active listening and psychological safety. Don't be quick to, you also have to work on your biases as a person. Remember, we talked about communication being perception. So you have to check your bias, you have to check your filters and your noise also to be able to hear what others are saying, and also support and champion a safe space for people to communicate. You have to be courageous. Evidence-based, arguments and solutions to challenges, but speak openly to leadership. Where the leadership needs to be called out, then you have to be bold enough to do it. Where the employees need to be put in line and check, then you have to be bold enough to do it. It's no mean feat, but it is the only way we are going to achieve what we want to achieve. Then crisis composure, In times of crisis, you have to be clear, calm, you have to make decisions fast and just under pressure. You have to build that muscle because everybody is looking to you. What is the HR saying? So are we coming to work? Are we having these, these mandamano experiences have been also something. People decide, oh, are we coming to work tomorrow? What is happening? You should be able to provide that direction. And finally, multi-channel fluency. You should be able to use available platforms, whether it's technology, whether it's the internet, whether it's video, whether it's social media platforms, whether it's town hall sessions to communicate to people and to engage them. And finally, we are almost coming to the end. I believe we are in good time. One, run a personal communication audit. Receiving feedback is critical. Some of us here are also Genos emotional intelligence practitioners, and this is one critical one, being able to receive feedback. If you're not doing something properly, then are you able to do that? And are you cultivating a culture where everybody within the team is able to receive feedback? Secondly, is to practice translating one strategic decision per month. Not everything. You may not do that today, but can you start with a vision? Can everybody understand what is it that this organization exists to do? The next time you can take on the mission, the next time the values, not just having them on the wall, lived experiences that people really can attest to what you're talking about. And then have those forums where you're listening and surveys where you're getting the pulse of the organization. And then develop and rehearse crisis communication playbook. I think we've talked about that. Seek coaching and training on executive storytelling and facilitation and public speaking. And public speaking is a muscle. It is it's something you build over time. It's not something that just happens. The more exposure you have, the better you become at it. I remember the first time Madam Kuresha was making those presentations at her HRM. She said how she has to have breakfast, otherwise she'll feel dizzy. And I was the opposite. I cannot have breakfast. I think Grace is also the same. You cannot eat something because then I feel sick in my stomach because that's where my nerves go. So it's not that you're not nervous, Richard, when you're talking about the protocols and all that. You just, with time, build the muscle to put the nerves aside or send them to your stomach or to somewhere, and you will deal with them later and articulately speak. So with time, with exposure, with coaching, with mentorship, then it's something that's doable for all of us to be able to communicate effectively. Whether it's written, whether it's verbal, and especially our non-verbals. If you're like me and your body speaks before your mouth opens, and someone is speaking and your eyes are already looking some kind of way or your face, then you need to be aware of that. So the self-awareness is important so that when you're not in a boardroom and you're quiet, but you're shouting, your body is speaking. And finally, build a trusted peer network across communication and other departments so that you can coordinate the messaging, that you're all saying the same thing. I think for me, as we bring this to a close, is that communicating, whether it's a conversation or the message being sent out, is a basis for building trust. And HR is not a message passer. If you forget anything, I said, is that your role is not to pass messages. The board has said this, the board has said this. Is to design that message, is to advise so that even by the time you're arriving to that message, every factor has been considered. So internal communication, executive communication, crisis communication, they all culminate towards achieving effective communication, towards building trust in the organization and enhancing productivity in the organization. They are not separate. They all have to work together. And you cannot build trust during a crisis, so you have to prepare in advance. You have to strengthen those communication channels and build the capacity of the different people who would be involved so they are able to communicate effectively when it matters. And then I think something else is also how do you manage perception? Because perception is the greatest hindrance towards effective communication and interpreting the message as intended. And one is to deliberately check that you are aligned. Once you send a message or you release a policy or there's a change initiative that's going on, oftenly go back and check, are we aligned? Are we still saying the same thing? Is what the employees understood what we intended to communicate? Secondly is to check assumptions, whether it's your assumptions as an individual, the assumptions of the team, the assumptions of leadership. Don't assume things, just ask and get the feedback. Remain consistent and authentic. If you're going to build trust, then people should see that you're honest about it and you're consistent. You're not one person today and a different person tomorrow. And then mastering both verbal and non-verbal cues. I think I've talked about this. You could be sharing a very happy message, but how your face looks or your tone of voice or your pitch or your volume or how quickly or slow you're speaking and how you're using your hands is communicating a different thing. So self-awareness, practice, look at yourself in the mirror as you speak, see whether you use your hands too much, whether you speak too quickly, whether you swallow some of your words, whether as you get anxious, your tone, your pitch goes up, or you slow down your speaking, or you have very many fillers, you're saying, improve your communication so that you're able to engage and to share the message. Body language, your posture, your eye contact, how you engage, all those will help bridge the gap between what was communicated and what was understood, or what was intended and what was understood. And to close, George Bernard Shaw says that the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. We send an email, we send an SMS, we stand in a meeting and make a speech, or we send a new document, and we assume that people have understood that communication has taken place. That is the biggest challenge. So for us this evening, the challenge is how do we reduce miscommunication? How do we enhance engagement? And how do we ensure that what we intended is what was understood? And how do we support our teams to understand where it is that we are going? Allow me to stop at that, Grace. I think with some of those thoughts, we can become better communicators as HR professionals. I'm happy to take any questions or comment if there is any.
Amazing, 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 amazing. As you spoke about arranging face, I was just smiling.
Yeah.
I was just smiling because there are those of us whose face speaks before the sound, or rather, you start messaging. But thank you. That was really, really interesting. And I can see the chat has also been busy saying, good job, great insights from Zalendo. And I'm sure my friend Herbert Zake from Uganda, I don't know whether you're still on the call. Herbert Zake is a HR who is like Irene, HR combined with PR. And I think their communication is technically on another level that we need to keep learning from. So I see Shamim as well is on the call saying, excellent, thank you very much. Millicent says, thank you. So there's somebody who's asking, what are some of the strategies? Oh God, I have lost that one. Let me just look for it. What are some of the strategies of creating a sideways communication?
A sideways communication within the team.
Yeah, that is just where maybe Adisa, you can clarify that question so that we are able to. Yeah, she says within an organization. Yeah, how do you create sideway communication? What was that?
Yes, I think it's lateral communication with the team. I can start with the example I gave. If you have a team, then put the employees in groups, in projects. If you're working on something, then make sure that each department is represented in the team, so that there is that cross, I don't know, for lack of a better word, cross-pollination is what came to mind, but everybody knows what is happening within the organization. Then clearly define the goals and the KPIs so people are clear who does what, where does my responsibility start, where does it end? And then with technology, you can have collaborative tools so that even Google Docs or Zoho Docs, those automated Excel or documents, so that if you're editing something, you're working on something, then somebody else can see and make comments, depending on the rights and editing authority you can give, then people can see, oh, this is what this team is doing. Let me add, you can just be updated for your information. Cross-functional team, I think that was what I was talking about initially. Then informal interactions, maybe, quick stand-up meetings, and this one can say, this is what we're working on, this is what we're working on, this is the support we need from this team. And then maybe clear communication. You can have an internal, I know of organizations that have internal newsletters. So every week, they say what has happened in the previous week, what's coming up with the new week. But that is mainly for big organizations. You tend to see them have that. So that you all avoid, rivalry or some unnecessary and healthy competition or unproductive chatter, or, you didn't know, you were not informed, you were not copied. Those are the ones that come to mind.
Excellent, excellent. I'm sure, Richard, you're burning with questions. Shoot.
Thank you very much, Irene Kemashia. And one of the things that I want to ask, and actually you've stolen it from me, it is you communication experts, that includes Grace, tell us that body language constitutes almost 55% of our communication. Yes, you could be having the right content, very well structured, but your body language will say. How do we improve our communication, especially nonverbal, so that it's well aligned with the message that we are delivering? The other second question is this. Most of us assume that when we are talking is when we are communicating, yet we know that listening is a very important ingredient. How do we improve listening? How do we improve our body language?
So one, for body language, you need to first be aware of that body language. There are people who have never even stood on the mirror and saw how they speak, how they use their hands, what they do with their face, what they do with their eyes, and all that. So one, be aware of how you speak. Maybe you can even record yourself as you're speaking, or ask the feedback we were talking about. You have to be bold enough to ask, how do I speak? How do, what's my tone? What do I need to improve on? And then once you are aware, you can now start adjusting. Secondly is the training. For us in the communication space, public speaking, presentation skills were a whole semester's subject. And you would come, you're taught what you need to do, then the next day you come to class and you do it in front of people, and you're given the critique on the spot. You're told, we were told when you're speaking, you don't start by saying, by the way, I need to say this one, Grace. You need to stop saying, I was not the one who was invited for this program. My PS invited me last minute. So you just allow me to, don't discredit yourself before you even speak. So you're taught such things. You're also taught how to introduce yourself. You're taught how to, you will find people who are very good speakers. When they are on stage and you're noisy, they'll just go quiet. Instead of saying, hello, can you hear me? Hello, hello, just be quiet. All of a sudden, people will wonder, why you be quiet? And they'll actually pay attention. So those things are taught. It's actually a skill, like I said. So go for coaching, go for Toastmasters, go for these communication classes when they're there, public speaking classes. And that way, then you can enhance your skills, and your nonverbals will not work against you. because we all have our tendencies. Even the feelers of those are called feelers. You can learn how to minimize your feelers. So Richard, I think for non-verbal communication, issues of posture, how you stand in front of people. I've seen people with microphones. Hey, that's the worst. They hold it like this and they forget and they are pointing with it, or they hold it at the bottom. You know, a microphone is, especially it's called a one direction microphone. You speak to it here and the antenna is at the bottom. So you need to hold it somewhere there so that you're speaking into it and then the antenna is open to receive the connection to the speakers. So somebody holds it this way and the whole time they're like, this microphone is not working. So those things are learned and they can be taught and anybody can learn them. And with time, even exposure, go for these forums, observe how people are behaving, and then with time you learn how to do it. Richard, what was the second question?
The second question, most of us have this actually, as you said, in communication jargon, this noise of believing that when they're talking is when they're communicating. They fail to understand the role of listening in communication. So how can we improve listening skills?
We can, I talked about minimizing your bias. Sometimes we're so biased unconsciously based on our cultures, on our beliefs, on our experiences, and we think that's how life should be. Our way is the right way. So one is to be aware that you have the bias and you need to minimize that. But active listening is being fully focused. It is seeking to understand and then responding, after you have understood what is being said. So it's to learn to eliminate the distractions, whether they're in your mind, whether they're in your perceptions, whether it's in the environment you're in, so that you really focus on what is being said. Then listen to understand so that you can respond to what has been said or even not said, other than just waiting for the person to finish so that you can jump. You're already ready with the answer that you are preparing to respond with. So, and then being engaged. Listen to the person, look at them, eye contact, nod. When you're actually making effort, then the other person can tell that you're actively listening. Then don't be quick to interject. I know Grace had written this on her status at some point that when you tell her something and she shares back, she's just trying to support. But coaching is teaching her that you need to wait for the other person. So I think it's the same thing with all of us. There's a temptation to want to say your piece. So just hold back and let the other person respond. Then ask open-ended questions. If you really want to listen to understand, then you probe the person to say more before then you can respond. Those are some of the things that come to mind.
Thank you very much.
I'm looking at the chat and I'm thinking, you guys, it is 9:11. There are quite a number of questions, but there's one that has really caught my eye on the Q&A that says, how do you overcome systemic indifference? Say you build this HR communication-in-chief skill, but the culture of the organization from the top doesn't lean to it. That is in brackets, the way senior leadership likes to communicate or not communicate is just off. How do you still thrive or influence in such an environment?
I almost want to push it back to them because I think that is the $1 million question for all of us. But I think it goes back to the executive coaching. Now, as a HR, if you've built the muscle to be a communicator-in-chief, what are you doing to do the same with the leadership and build their skills to communicate? Because sometimes I've also realized leadership will shy away from communicating because they're not confident in their communication skills. They have the message, but most people are very uncomfortable with speaking in front of people or putting things in writing, and now it becomes official, so they would rather say it on the side. So one, what are you doing to build the capacity of the leader to communicate effectively? Secondly, how are you using your skill to influence the communication that goes out there? Remember, I talked about being a ghostwriter. So if communication is writing a speech for the CEO or for the chairman or for somebody, or a newsletter is being drafted and sent out, how are you contributing to that? How are you enhancing the quality of the communication of the message that goes out? Because sometimes also sometimes remember we also said there are people who don't want to communicate intentionally. So maybe you are very keen on wanting to communicate, but then the withholding of information is a strategy. Sometimes there's only so much you can do when that is the case. So maybe reach out to the leadership, try and build their capacity to communicate. So you clear that's not the issue. Also contribute to the messaging that's going out and add value so that when the message goes out, then it captures some of the issues that you would want addressed. Most of the times, actually, when it's crafted, people then see it and they are like, "Oh, this is actually what I wanted to say." So maybe you need to support them with the crafting of the messages. Yeah, that's it, Chris.
Yeah. I think in the interest of time, let me just answer this question from Mary. He's saying, how does a leader ensure they are trusted? I think the bottom line of that would be consistency. If you're consistent, if people can be able to know what you say you actually mean, it does not mean that you tell them what they want to hear. But if they can be able to, or they regard you as credible, that the information you share is not out to finish them, for lack of a better word, then you build trust. But I think bottom line of trust building is consistency. Yeah. How can HR ensure communication remains consistent across all departments during crisis? I think Irene covered that from using different communication tools, etc. How do we learn the art of articulation to be able to capture the attention of whoever is listening to you? Come to class. I think officially
Yes, we will start a program.
We need to start a
I think
program.
maybe
Yes.
Grace, quickly to that, how do you build the articulation? One is reading. The more you read, the more you speak. Because you know why you struggle with communicating in front of people, especially, is when you run out of words. You know, you stand in front of people and the language goes, the confidence goes. But if you read often, then you have the language, you have examples, you have experiences, then observe. Look at what other people do, actually. If you find somebody who's a very good speaker, look at what they do, look at how they pronounce, how they speak, how they deliver a message. Some of these things can actually be learned by observing.
Grace, I can also drop in a point in
Yes.
addition to what Irina said. Look for tongue twisters. Tongue twisters also assist in building your articulation capacity. Shirika la reli la Rwanda.
Yes.
He sells seashells at the seashore.
Yes, all those.
Yeah. I mean, I think communication seems like a topic that we can have all day, but clearly there's a program coming up in October on public speaking. Maybe you need to come on board as well for that session. But I think Irene, you and I need to have a conversation with Richard and see when we are launching a program for a 10-week program on communication
Yes,
to see how that goes.
Yes.
Right. So I think, Irene, I'll invite you to give your parting shot.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Grace, and thank you for the feedback. I appreciate it, and the comments and the questions. I agree. This is something that we need to do a lot more often. Communication is critical. Communication is a foundation of how you receive other people, how they receive you. So build that muscle. Have the courage to speak your mind. Have the courage to share your opinion, to make your contribution, and also have the courage to allow other people to do the same. So don't allow your filters, your bias to dictate how other people should respond. Be open to receive from them as well. So thank you so much for the opportunity. Have a good night.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much for also showing up for us and for sharing something that comes quite easy for you. And we look forward to learning from you. That is somebody. Yes, I can see the emojis are coming. Sarah says, looking forward to the next. Thank you for the amazing session. Thank you so much, guys. It's been always a pleasure, and thank you for making the time. Please follow us on Instagram at Ara Solutions. Join our Facebook page, or rather like our Facebook page at Ara Solutions. Connect with us on LinkedIn at Ara Solutions, and the recording will be uploaded on our YouTube channel. Paul has shared that on the chat. You can subscribe to be able to get that, and then of course, join our WhatsApp group to know what's coming up. Next week, we actually have a very interesting conversation on human intelligence. That one I'm looking forward to because it's a concept that is really coming up in the areas of human resources and all that. So next week, that is the conversation we're going to have. And to be able to get the link quickly, you can join our WhatsApp group. I think Paul has shared that on the chat. And I see Madam Kuresha has left her her takeaway. Thank you very much for that. And I see Madam Amina as well, a council member at IHRM, was also on the chat, on the call. Asante sana. So guys, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure, and see you next Tuesday, same time, as we discuss yet another interesting topic. Like I've said, we're looking at human intelligence in a way to do capacity building. It's going to be a very exciting conversation, and I'm looking forward to a new concept, that is. So I hope that you'll also be here. So thank you very much, and have yourselves a lovely night. And for those in Nairobi, keep warm. For those in Arusha, keep warm. For those in Kampala, I don't know what's happening in Kampala. Shamim, you have not updated me. But if it is cold, please keep warm. And for those joining us from the rest of the world, have yourselves a lovely evening, and see you next Tuesday as we get it right. Night.
Good night, everybody. See you on Tuesday.